In my life, a fundamental goal that I've held for a long time is to simply be useful in the world. If I can serve others in some meaningful way and not just take up space and make noise, then I'm happy. And that's a fundamental principle in all that we do online as well. Taking up online space and making a lot of noise without providing your audience something useful is a recipe for failure. In this section, we'll talk about being useful and how to avoid that disaster. We've covered the human aspect of narrative and the computer aspects of usable and seamless. Now we're going to move on to the interaction portion of human-computer interactions. And we're going to start with useful. Now, we're going to talk about useful. Useful is all about relevance and meaning for your users. The easiest to use and the most functionally perfect, the most seamless system that you put out there for them is meaningless to your users if it doesn't offer things of interest and value to them, whatever they happen to be doing or need in their lives. And also, useful refers to the various tools, functions, features that help users make sense of your content and helps them be productive in whatever digital systems you're putting in front of them. So useful is both about relevant content as well as useful ways to access and interact with it. That aspect of functions and features to access and interact could include things like search, saving things that are important to them, easily finding product options, calculators for doing financial things, interactive maps to find their way around, suggestions on past history, sharing their history with them, providing breadcrumbs so they know where they've been. There are many more. Amazon is a great example of providing unbelievable number of useful features and functions on their websites and their various programs. And we're going to look at that in more detail here in a minute. Before we do that, let's explore relevance further because it's so important. The question to ask yourself is this: is what I'm showing my audience, the world, through this interface something that my user cares about? Are they interested? Do they care? And again, here we're talking about the content of the interface, the content of what you're providing them as opposed to the interface itself. If I'm a user out there looking for a new lawnmower, learning about aluminum siding doesn't do me any good. Now, the site that's showing me the aluminum siding may be usable, but it's not relevant. It's not useful. A nuanced understanding of the user's narrative, and we explored that narrative process earlier, that narrative in the larger context of their lives, their jobs, what they're doing, and where you could potentially be of use to them in that context is potentially the single most important insight you can seek about your audience because it will trump everything else. Now, this may seem obvious. Why in the world would you want to show a user information or a product or service that they don't care about, that doesn't interest them? Why would you ever do that? You'd be surprised at how many people don't ask this question and don't go to the links required to truly answer it. That's the essence of their problem. They're not really understanding enough about their users to understand that what they're offering is going to be useful and relevant to them. Now, here's a vivid example of not useful. However, this is a bit of an exaggeration because in most cases, if your user was a fish, they probably wouldn't have a whole lot of interest in the bicycle. Here are a few more cases of not useful. Here's a DVD rewinder. Now, I wonder if my mother ever bought one of those. Hell yes, here we have cat wigs. Now this cat looks like one that I used to own, but that particular cat probably wouldn't have tolerated putting an orange wig on him. Here's one. How about diet water? I wonder what they take out of that to make it less fattening. And a new twist on an old favorite. Here's a USB pet rock. Yeah, I wonder if I have to eject that when I'm done using it. Oh, and finally, here's my favorite, a battery-powered battery charger. So this might work in a parallel universe. Not sure how useful it is in the real world. But seriously, here's an example of what might be the most useful website on the internet. Here is an example of the Amazon website. Now, they have got it figured out for sure. And this includes both the useful content that I mentioned earlier, which really is above and beyond what almost any other website out there offers. But this also includes a lot of the features, functions, gadgets, widgets, and other gizmos that they offer. Now, I've highlighted 15 here. This is from a typical Amazon page, but I could have identified twice that many. So we've got things that you're probably familiar with, a wish list, what other customers bought relative to this product that I'm looking at, what other customers viewed, editorial reviews on the product, user reviews, previews of the book content, lots of product details, one-click purchasing, and many, many more. So as we're looking at this Amazon webpage packed with all these useful features and functions and widgets, I should remind you that the importance of this idea within useful of utility, which can be just as much about what you leave out as what you leave in. The question to ask is, are specific functions or sets of functions appropriate for what the user needs to do? Or are they distracting? Are they too complicated? Are they confusing? So considering what to leave out will help you identify what is superfluous or patronizing, garish, and loud, and harken back to that Turbo Encabulator video that I showed you. And again, it's also about simplicity and clarity. It's about what it does and how well it does it. Now, in this context of useful, it's critical that I acknowledge a central, fundamental aspect of useful and business principles. Let me tell you what I mean here. Now, I use an image of a target here intentionally. The question is, who are you? What do you do, and for whom do you do it? Now, it assumes that what's behind that human-computer interface is sound, that it's on target. Your core value proposition, your purpose, your unique selling proposition, your reasons for existing. But asking the tough questions about useful may require that you bring those core business fundamentals into question. If, in this process of learning your user's narrative that we covered earlier and determining how useful you are to whoever you are intending to serve, if you learn that you are off target, the reasons for that, for being off target, and the solutions to that being off target, may require much more than simply tweaking the human-computer interface that you put out there. And your users are going to determine whether those are in question. And if they are, you need to be willing to deal with it. And that may not be the most pleasant discovery. It may be a very frustrating one, but it's one that you must deal with if it occurs. If that's the case, if in examining narrative and this question of useful, you discover that you are off target with your audience, with your target users, you must be willing to face that, deal with it, and act on it, however agonizing that discovery might be. Here's a more nuanced look at key questions about how useful you are to your users that might help you clarify this and really identify what the variables are and what to do about them. In this analysis, the rows and the columns in this table that you see here have three components. First, the humans, and these are your users, your customers, your visitors, your prospects, whoever your audience happens to be, your particular set of people that you're trying to reach and influence. Second of all is your core business purpose and whatever your value proposition is and the associated products and services that you're trying to offer these people in the world. Third are the offers, calls to action, content, and whatever you're providing those humans that connect those first two. So you have your core business, your products and services, the humans you're trying to deliver them or provide them for. And then there are all the messages and the content that you're used to communicate all of that and connect your purpose with whatever it is you believe your customers need. So let's walk through this. For each of these three, this table here looks at the possible combinations of getting those three right, which is really across the top row, or potentially getting them wrong, which is down the left column. And here are the key insights in looking at this approach. So first of all, in blue, if your core value proposition, who you are as a business, is on target, and the offers and content you're putting in front of customers is right, but you're not reaching the right people, you may need to shift your marketing and programs and shift who you're targeting. You may need to validate your core value proposition and offers just to be sure, but the main challenge here might be you just need to aim yourself in a different direction. You need to target a different set of people. That's a challenge, but it's definitely a solvable problem. Second of all, if your users and your value proposition are on track, in other words, what you do lines up with who you're trying to do it for, if those are in alignment, it could be that your offers and your content are off track. In other words, people are just not understanding or connecting with or resonating with how you're communicating. It might be a communication problem. So it may be time to revise those offers, that content, those call to action, so that they better appeal to your audience and convince them to take action. But the most challenging one is this one here in red. If you're convinced that you're reaching the right users, so the people that you really believe you should be serving, but they're not engaging, then ultimately, and you're sure that what you're saying to them accurately describes what you're about and your unique selling proposition, it could be that you may need to rethink your business, your strategy, your competitive position, or any other core aspect, any other fundamental of what you're attempting. So it's important to separate those three. Who are the people? What is it that you do? And how well is it that you are able to communicate it to those people? Now, as we've done with these other sections here in the workshop, let's take a look at why this is so important. Useful is so paramount, as I mentioned earlier, that it probably trumps all other aspects of human-computer interactions. And you've probably experienced this yourself. If, for example, you're on a website that has content that truly matters to you, but the site is poorly designed, difficult to use, has dead ends, doesn't perform well, it violates any of the other principles and practices that we talk about here in this workshop, you will probably still persevere. If it's useful and meaningful to you, you'll figure out a way. You will power through whatever you have to find out what it is that you need. So relevance is really the most relevant one here, or one of the most relevant one. And it's the one that users won't forgive. If what they see, and again, it can be the most elegantly designed, the best possible user experience, highly performing, modern, everything about it can be just right. But if the content and the message and what it offers simply doesn't mean anything to the user, none of that other stuff matters. Looking at usefulness and useful can challenge your core purpose. And don't we all want to make sure our core purpose is right? So this not only addresses whether your users are finding what's meaningful and relevant, but it really begs the question of whether you're attracting and reaching the right people as well. Answering those fundamental questions is going to be an important outcome of this inquiry into useful. So again, as I mentioned with the Amazon example, useful really goes beyond relevance, and it really talks about features, functions, tools. How are you making your online presence, your interactive presence, useful by providing all the right capabilities that users are going to engage and be able to make sense of it and access content, etc. Users will decide usefulness instantly. Here I say a few seconds. It's usually faster than that. It might be less than a second. The first glance at whatever it is you're providing, vast majority of people will know immediately what you're about and what you offer. So that again, keeps users away from the exits. So that anyone who does leave should be leaving. They don't belong there anyway. And so here's what you need to know in order to really get into this realm of useful. So you obviously have to start with who is your target in some detail. You need to know specifically who they are, what they need, what they want. The narrative process that I described earlier is a great way to really get into that. And it can branch in various different directions. An essential business question, of course, is whether or not you are attracting and engaging the right people that you consider. So you need to know that. That's a most fundamental business question you might be able to ask yourself in this process. And then, of course, how do you find out? If you are attracting the right people, how do you validate how well aligned you are with those people? And then, if you're off the mark, even partially, what are you going to do? You need to decide what action you're going to take. You can change your marketing, your promotional activities, social media, any other way that you're communicating. You need to figure out how you're going to fix that problem, because without fixing it, you're going to be missing your target. And as I've explored here, providing useful capabilities in your online programs can keep them engaged initially, keep them coming back, and of course encourage them to take the actions that are going to lead to whatever outcomes that you're trying to accomplish. Finally, and this is, again, the even more challenging problem, is when you're convinced you're attracting the right people, and you can verify that, but they're not interested in what you offer. That's a much deeper problem. Now, with all the work I've done the last 20 years with businesses in this realm, I can help you with this. Usually involves a lot more extensive user research, probably some market analysis, looking at competition, and probably some more in-depth business development. But definitely contact me if you believe this is an area where you need help. I've helped many Fortune 500 companies around the world do this over the last 20 years. So this is a game changer for a variety of reasons that I've talked about. This can reveal a great deal about where you stand with your users, those people that are going to determine whether you're successful or not. While it may be unnerving to take a hard look at your purpose in the world, facing that truth and what that process reveals to you can force you to deal with the real challenges that are really underlying any agony you experience about not getting users to respond. So you can put lipstick on a pig, but you definitely don't want to be putting lipstick on the wrong pig. That's even worse. In the simpler and likely easier case, if you really believe your core business is on track, then assessing usefulness can reveal ways that you can improve your marketing, your messaging, fine-tune who it is you're targeting, what you're saying to them, what you're offering them. You don't want to be throwing money at the wrong users. But if you are, that's a solvable problem. But you have to go investigate and find out if that's the case. And then, of course, in all cases, there's this fundamental questions about your role in the world, your relevance to your target audience, how you present yourself. How well you can answer those, react to them, and align the outcomes is going to advance who you are as a professional. And it's going to advance how well you can serve those users, and of course, how well you can serve your colleagues, your company, and whatever operation you're involved with. Many people don't know how to deal with that. They don't know how to either get at those essential questions, or they don't know they're important, or once they look at them, they don't know how to deal with the answers. And those are all pretty critical challenges that we all have to face.